The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Arcane Wonders and Tasty Minstrel Games. Check out all their awesome titles at arcanewonders.com and playtmg.com.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review What's Your Game's Railroad Revolution. Then they look back at their reviews of Quadropolis and Millennium Blades in a special Dukes Quadruple-Take. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
And this is episode 142, which we've titled Tracks of the Trade. Tracks, Alex. Tracks.
Yes.
Of the Trade.
Very well done. This was Daniel Newman who named this week's episode. We get all of our episode names for our Board Game Geek Guild. Like this one a lot because you get tracks for the Railroad Revolution piece. And then, of course, Millennium Blades. Trading is a heavy part of the equation.
Lots of trading.
Made perfect sense to me. So.
And then the saying Tricks of the Trade.
Yeah, we had a lot of good names, though, this week.
Yeah, we sure did. And we had a little bit of a heated discussion about which ones belong to the top six.
Right.
But we'll get to that later.
At the end of the episode.
Yes, indeed. And if you want to help contribute, go on over to Board Game Geek. We're guild number 2008, and you can help name the episodes and contribute to what we have to say about the different games we're talking about.
Very good. Hey, it's a normal episode this week, Sean.
It sure is. Are you okay? You know how to do this still?
I'm pretty sure. Okay. I got the intros 2 weeks in a row.
Well, I kind of set it up this way so that last week we can kind of like work you in, get you back up, get your sea legs.
Yeah, and instead we had the weirdest podcast recording ever in a condo on the floor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it weirder than standing in line at the flea market at Dice Tower Con?
Yes. I would argue the condo one was weirder than the Dice. Because the Dice Tower Con one was kind of cool. We had an audience there.
Yeah.
It was actually pretty cool.
Was that the one where I did a dance?
Yeah, you absolutely did that dance.
Yeah, I did that dance. And then we had to, then the flea market started. And
Rhythm gonna get you.
We had to break. Yep. And then we came back later. We had to like break like mid-thought of Suzanne.
Boy, this is all fascinating for new listeners.
It's fine. It's fine.
Let's talk about some games.
Well, let's talk about some show business first.
What? Show business?
So if you don't know, the Dukes have a Patreon campaign going. It's over at patreon.com/Dukes of Dice. And it helps pay for ongoing costs of the show, review copies of games, all sorts of stuff, equipment. Hey, Alex, is there a few new pieces of equipment since you've been here last?
Yeah, it appears as much, although this basement is a disaster zone.
It is a disaster zone, but at least when I frame it on camera, it looks fine.
Sure.
So is this throwing you for a loop? Because we're actually on the opposite side of the basement from where we usually are.
It's very strange, and I'm much further away from you.
Yeah.
I can't let you have Happy Salmon.
Happy Salmon.
Not at this distance.
Self-Happy Salmon. Okay.
All right.
All right.
Well, that was even weirder.
That was super weird. We kind of looked like we're trying to paddle, but we didn't know how to do it. Anyway. Hey, let's talk about some board games now. So, Alex, what have you been playing recently?
So, I want to talk about a game that I didn't get to talk about from my time in New Zealand. And that was a game called Skull, although it was also known at one point as Skull and Roses. And this is a game where you have 4 different tiles, effectively. They have hearts on 3 of them and a skull on 1 of them. And what you're going to do is on your turn, you can do one of 2 things. You can place a tile down, or you can call for a bet. And if you call for a bet, you're basically going to, similar to Liar's Dice, say, I think I can pull 2 tiles without getting a skull. And then someone might say, I can pull 3 tiles and then 4 tiles. And whatever that bid is, you have to pull off the tiles on your piece first and then pull off the other player's tiles. So if you played a skull on yours and end up winning the bet, you lose the round. Automatically, you're done.
Wait, if you win the bet, you lose the round?
If you win the bet and you placed a skull in front of you,
okay,
you lose the round. But you want to put skulls in front of you because if someone else is betting and they pick from your stack, you knock them out of the round. They lose one of their 2 lives. Basically, you're playing until everyone's eliminated or until someone's won 2 bets.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, it's not 2 live. I was flipping things a little bit. You lose a tile. You lose one of your 4 tiles at random if you don't get your bet correct. So you might lose your skull, you might lose your roses as the game goes on. It gets interesting. It's a fun little bluffing game. I recommend keeping an eye out for it. But
is it available? Is it in print?
Should be available. I think it's still in print.
Okay.
I don't know by who or where, but I think, I was looking this up as one to possibly purchase, and I recall it being available, I think on Amazon.
Okay.
So look for Skull or Skull and Roses. It's a game and it's fun.
Excellent.
Back to you, Sean.
So there's been a game at Empire Board Game Library that's been incredibly hot the last couple weeks. It's from WizKids and it's called The Banishing. It's designed by Sean Rumble. So the little tagline here is, a dark void has opened and undead creatures are attempting to enter our world. You have come together as guardians who must work together to force the undead back through the void. However, the longer it takes, the stronger the undead become, threatening to overwhelm all. How's that sound? Sounds cool?
Yeah, pretty cool.
All right. Well, it's kind of an abstract game, and it's cooperative, and it's really good. This game is pretty awesome. So you have asymmetric powers. I was about to say asynchronous, but asymmetric powers. Different character classes, essentially. There's like a fighter and a wizard and whatnot. You have different hit points, and you also have different abilities, but they all are kind of variations on the same. There's one that lets you attack the undead. There's one that lets you kind of heal, and there's one that actually banishes cards. Because I'm not sure if it's dependent on the number of players, but we played with 4 players, and basically we had to banish 10 cards before one of us died or before we ran through the deck a certain number of times. And the way the game's set up is you are going to deal out these cards in a 3x3 grid. And on a player's turn, they have to take either a row or a column of 3. That's the first thing they do. Now, there's going to be some red cards, some green cards, some blue cards, and then of 3 different shapes, different variations. But then there's also 1 wound and 2 wound cards. And so if you take a column that has any wounds in it, you have to add those wounds in front of you. At a certain point, about the halfway point of your hit points, you lose a bunch of your special abilities until you get healed by yourself or someone else. So it's kind of an interesting decision. Oh, I really need this red triangle, but I'm going to take these 2 wounds as part of that grab. Now, once you've taken these 3 cards, you're then able to play any melds of either all green cards, all of one color. They don't have to be matching symbols, and that gets you kind of a lesser action. Or if you could play all of one color and all of one symbol as one meld, it's a stronger action. So like I was the fighter, and if I played matching red cards, I could basically attack cards in the grid, in that 3x3 grid, and get rid of them. So if there's a bunch of wounds out there, I can get rid of those. The blue cards are going to let you banish the undead. Every time you go through the deck, you're adding another level of wounds. So there are these 4 wound and 5 wound undead. And they're like, so the ones are like skeletons, and then the 5s are vampires, and they kind of have different variations in between. This game was an interesting puzzle. This was a lot of fun. It wasn't terribly complex. Like the rule set's really simple, but there's enough variety, enough variability in terms of the different player powers. And it's just such a tactical game. Like there's no long-term strategy really. It's just kind of these tactical decisions. It was really solid. I see why it's been so popular at Empire. I think you're going to like this a lot. And because you can't give perfect information about your hand, there's not necessarily a problem with alpha gaming, but you can take lesser actions too, where you trade cards and you say, hey, does anyone need a red triangle or whatever? You can trade cards. You can get rid of some cards to heal yourself. Lots of cool things. I really enjoyed this. It's The Banishing from WizKids.
Yeah, I got to get this one to the table at some point. It has certainly been on the table every time I've been in Empire since I've been back.
I'm going to pick it up. I think it needs to be in the Duchy.
Very good. I got in a game that absolutely needs to be in the Duchy in the sense that I'm probably going to buy this game as soon as I can.
So double Duchy.
Yeah.
I own it.
Oh, do you own this already?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I might have to steal this. It's
No.
This is a game called Hanamikoji, which I think you probably would have discussed on the show at some point. I know if I'd listened to every episode, but...
In fact, the Mike Fitzgerald episode.
I did listen to that one.
He discussed it first, and then I talked about it a couple weeks later when I picked it up, and he thinks it's amazing, and I think it's amazing.
And I think it's amazing, too.
Hooray!
So, hooray! Triple unified opinion on this one's pretty awesome. For folks who don't know, this is a game where you're trying to win the influence of different geishas. You have a handful of cards. You have to do one of 4 different actions, either play a card out secretly, discard 2 cards, play out 3, your opponent picks 1 to keep, you keep 2, or kind of a you cut, they choose type of thing, where you make 2 piles of 2 cards, your opponent picks 1 to keep, and you get the other 2. It works really well. It's so elegant, so quick, but really interesting decisions. It interestingly enough, has a bit of AP almost burnt into it. More so for its weight of game. Not in a bad way. They're really crunchy, hard decisions, oddly enough, I find. Really enjoy this game. Really enjoy the tug of war here. Really enjoy the kind of taking cards as they go, trying to sneak different geishas away from your opponent. The imperfect information you have in that situation. I think it plays beautifully, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I wish it were more readily available right now so I could buy this game.
2 things, Alex.
Yes.
Number 1, you're bearing the lead.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is a news term, but I guess it's a printed news term.
I don't do news anymore.
Yeah, I know, but it's printed news.
I don't do news, except for in a couple minutes when we're about to do the news segment.
Sure. The art. You didn't mention the art.
Oh, the art's gorgeous.
Oh, no, come on. It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's not just gorgeous. It's like...
No, it looks great.
Supremely gorgeous.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
It's nice.
Done by Majorly.
Yeah.
Who is excellent. And I'm excited to see more stuff from her because it's super good. And second, I feel like, okay, so what's the over-under on how long you're going to have to reference like, oh, well, you may have talked about this on the show previously, but I didn't listen.
We'll see.
What's the over-under?
Oh.
Well, I'll provide the number, and then you pick over-under.
Okay.
And then out there in the guild, we'll do no, never mind. Okay. Forget it.
This is a silly game.
6 weeks.
Over.
Okay.
I think over. Just based on life. So that's Hanamikoji. I strongly recommend you pick it up because every time I've been in Empire, I've had a desire to play this one. And I've played it against Matthew even when I was over at his house.
Cool.
So play this game because it's awesome.
So I've gotten a lot of electronic plays in, whether it's on app or on Board Game Arena. I played a bunch of games into Pawn recently. Just finished a couple of those. I'm currently playing a game of Food Chain Magnate, your favorite game, Alex.
No.
With a couple listeners. And I've got a big turn right now. I'm very excited. I want everyone to take their moves. But the one I really want to talk about is the Terra Mystica app, which finally came out. Terra Mystica was my number 1 game a couple years ago. It's currently my number 2 game. Whoa, this is awesome. Remind me, you've played Terra Mystica once, right?
One time.
But you're willing to give it another shot.
Yes.
You've like
unlike Tzolk'in.
No,
which I'm pretty done on Tzolk'in.
Before you left, you said at this point in your gaming career, you're willing to give Tzolk'in another try. You said that before you left.
I might have.
Yeah, no, you did.
Okay.
Yeah.
I take it all back.
You have the memory of a goldfish.
I take it all back.
We were discussing this.
Yeah, we were. In the special super secret Duke's chat.
Yes.
Featuring 3 people.
Yes. So anyway.
Including Grumpy Man Matthew.
Oh man, you were so mean to him.
No, it's accurate and he embraces the term.
Okay, anyway, what we're talking about, Terra Mystica App, right? So this just came out a couple weeks ago. I've probably played it 3-4 times. It takes a while to play. Part of that is because the AI, I've only played against AI so far, takes a while. In fact, you can choose to have 5-second turns, 10-second turns, 15-second turns. And my understanding is the algorithm for them is all the same. It just takes different amounts of time. I'm not sure. I'd be curious to see if anyone out there knows the reason behind that. But let me tell you, this AI on easy is kicking my butt. It is kicking my butt. Even though it's my second favorite game, I've never been great at Terra Mystica. Like, I enjoy it. I love it. I love the puzzle of it, but I've never been that great at it. I've probably won twice out of 15 games, and I'm fine with that. It doesn't bother me at all. It just gives me something to kind of shoot for. I want to get better, but this AI is just really kicking my butt. And what's really cool is that the AI is going to get harder and harder. They're going to release the medium and hard AIs. They're collecting data from all of us. So how we're playing the game, how we're inputting stuff is going to get built into the algorithm for those more difficult AIs. Well, it's got a great interface, right? Fantastic interface. It looks really good. They do a good job of pulling down these different windows so you can see different aspects of the board. It was a little confusing at first, but it was, I think, a fantastic purchase. It was a $10 app, Alex. I mean, right now at initial release, but for one of my favorite games that I don't get to pull out as often as I do, I'm really enjoying it. So that is the Terra Mystica app. Go check it out.
Sweet, sweet. All right. Last one I'm going to talk about is Baseball Highlights 2045. First mention because we played a tournament at Empire, Sean. We got a 14-player tournament going, a couple shy of the 16, but it worked out just fine.
Sure did.
Chris Holm, as always, did the organizing and did a stellar job organizing, had these great sheets for us to track our wins and losses in this game, and kept things running smoothly. I think this was the smoothest run of the 3, for sure.
Well, yeah, the third one, yeah, it was great.
It makes total sense. No rules questions, really, that came up, or not a ton of them. Other than you didn't totally understand Clutch.
I've been playing Clutch so wrong.
Yeah.
So wrong.
Yeah.
It's so good.
It's a really good ability. So we played, and as the night went on, Sean wanted to record one of the video segments.
The Dukes of Dice Dailies on YouTube.
And we wanted to be about the tournament. I said, well, Sean, until we're both knocked out of the tournament or we know what's going to happen with that, probably doesn't make sense to do that. And you were still a little insistent. I think you were hesitant because as the night wore on, this always lasts longer than you think it's going to last as far as the tournament goes. So the way this is formatted, by the way, is you have tables of divisions. Each table is a division. We had 4 tables. Sean, you were in the division that had 2 players, so you were going toe-to-toe, and you ended up advancing out of that. I made it out of my division into the playoffs. You have to be in the top 2 to make it out. By the skin of my teeth, I was 5-4 regular season out of 9 games and got in on run differential. Man, oh man, I was sweating bullets playing this one. But then I got to the playoffs, and I just started rolling. 1-4 games in the best of 5, 1-3 games in a sweep. And lo and behold, Sean, you were also doing some work in the playoffs too.
Yeah, I sure was. So what's interesting is you do all of the buys in the division, right? So just those initial, it's basically 3-game series, but it's not a best of series. You just play all 3 games. So everyone's going to leave that division with 9 buy rounds.
Right.
And what I find interesting about doing it this way is that when I'm playing in a head-to-head game, typically, and I'm doing these buy rounds, I'm trying to specifically count your deck, Alex, my opponent's deck. But here, since you're playing a whole host of different players, especially if you're advancing, you need to kind of have a well-rounded deck. So maybe if the first guy I'm playing has a bunch of cyborgs and I'm buying a bunch of anti-cyborg cards, well, that's going to be a problem when I play someone who has a bunch of robots. So I was working very much on trying to build that well-rounded deck, I was focusing a lot on buy power too, so I could leave with the best team possible. And I think I left with a pretty dang good team. It was pretty well-rounded. I think I had one more robot than I should have. But overall, I think it was a pretty decent team. And then...
Well, hang on. And I want to run through the semifinals because the championship series, you were up against Cameron, this was his third night playing this game ever. And he went on an epic run.
Yeah.
He makes it into the table playoffs against Chris, who's the defending tournament champion. They get to a game 5, and they go into extra innings. And in the third round of extra innings, effectively the 9th inning of the game, typical games go 6 innings for perspective. He nips Chris. Big upset. Cameron, awesome job. Then he squares off against you, and this is a back and forth series. I think he won 2 of the first 3.
I won win for me, and then 2 wins for him.
Right.
And then I had to go back-to-back wins.
And in game 5, you needed 1 card. You had to pull 1 card to save your season. And I think, did that one go to extras or was that just won you the game?
I think it just won me the game. No, it went to extras.
I think it went to extras. Because I think you won on the first or second card of extras.
Yeah, second card.
But Sean had to pull on a defensive save, and this will make no sense to anyone who doesn't know this game. I apologize.
This is super terrible.
I really apologize.
For people that haven't played baseball highlights or who don't like it.
You should play. If you're listening to this podcast and you haven't played this game, shame on you.
Well, yeah, that's
amazing.
Your favorite.
It's amazing. Sean pulled a cancel all hits versus a robot card off the top of his deck, enough to stop Cameron from winning outright, take it to extras, and then ended up beating him in extras.
Yeah.
And Cameron played a good card against you in extras. You just happened to have one that just was able to eke out just enough. And then, sure enough, waiting there in the finals, World Series, is me.
So, like I said, I thought I left with a pretty dang good deck. I think it was a pretty decent team. But then Alex apparently had 5 separate players in his team of 15 that all had some sort of hitbox and then home run. So single home run, double home run.
So a lot of them were cyborgs and some of them were naturals as well. But yeah, they had combos of cancel 1 hit, single home run, or cancel all hits versus a robot, double home run, cancel all hits versus a natural, single home run. It was a pretty well set up deck to be versatile against a lot of other people. Unless you had a lot of good anti-cyborg stuff, I was going to be in pretty good shape.
And I didn't. So was it the first 3 games were pretty decent? They were pretty decent.
The first one was more of a blowout, I thought.
Yeah, maybe.
Because Chris posted the recap and it was like 10-5.
Yeah.
But the second one was close.
Yeah.
The third one was close.
Yeah.
And then the fourth one, it was pretty clear who had it.
There was nothing. I saw my opening hand. I'm like, I can't do anything with this. Like, yeah.
Part of what helped me get to the World Series, but didn't actually help me as much in the World Series, and I tend to find this works really well in tournament play. I don't know if this always works. When Chris and I squared off in the World Series last time, which was epic, this was the second tournament, we both had the cards that have this ability called cloning, which lets you duplicate a previously used immediate action. That's a very versatile card, especially in tournament play when you don't know what you're up against. That's a good card to have going for you. It didn't come into play in our series so much. The one series where I had cloning abilities on, I actually lost that game. And so it's a good versatile card to have, but that series showed me that I had a good enough deck anyway.
Sure.
So,
yeah. No, it was solid. Like I said, I went in thinking, I've got a pretty good team. But no, your team just blew me out of the water.
It was a fun time, though.
Yeah.
And we recorded the whole series on YouTube. You can check out our YouTube channel if you want to watch how that all went down.
So it's a 17-minute video, and we play through pretty quickly. We don't really give a whole lot of explanation. And I'm curious if there are people out there that want to see some more video content for, I'm thinking 2 games, right? Baseball Highlights and Motainai. 2 Dutchy favorites that I think Baseball Highlights is probably getting a wider and wider audience as time goes on.
Right.
But still, it's not like, I'd like to see some more love for it. And Motainai certainly. So let us know out there if you're interested in seeing any video content for 2 games that we talk about a lot on the show.
Arguably too much.
Yeah, maybe. So sorry for everyone who's not interested in Baseball Highlights for all that Inside Baseball Highlights 24/5.
Sorry, Sean, for your humiliating defeat.
It was fine.
No, it was good time, and I finally won a tournament.
Hooray!
Hooray!
Yeah, that's the second time I've come in second place at a tournament at Empire.
Oh, yeah?
Star Realms. Okay. Lost to Davis in Star Realms.
Oh, boy. Oh, Sean. Sorry about that. Anyway.
Always the runner-up, never the champion.
Always the bridesmaid? That's the
reference.
The actual term.
No, I know, but...
All right. Well, that's going to do it for games we played.
Way to step all over the joke, Alex.
On to the news. All right. Well, welcome to the news segment. This is my first time doing news since leaving TV news. Well, actually, I think I did it on the show a couple times after I left TV news.
Talking about Kickstarter or something. Anyway.
Yeah, well, okay, whatever.
The Baseball Highlights Kickstarter. 12th mention.
At least. Go back and check if that was actually the 12th mention for no prize whatsoever. All right, first up, we're talking about a game called Dragonfire that's in development. And this one caught my eye because it's a combo of D&D, licensed D&D, and deck building.
As opposed to unlicensed D&D?
Well, as opposed to, say, something like Clank, which is deck building and a fantasy theme.
Okay.
Not that it's a D&D ripoff, but it's in that kind of fantasy universe.
You heard it here first, folks.
I love Clank.
Tell Renegade Games,
No,
Alex thinks Clank is a ripoff.
That's not what I was trying to say. All right. This is being done by Catalyst Game Labs. Battletech, The Duke, and Shadowrun Crossfire are some of their past releases. Sean, have you played any of those?
Well, I've played Shadowrun Crossfire. I think you have too. We may have played it with Bob a million years ago.
Long time ago.
Yeah. So this is actually, my understanding, kind of a retheme of Shadowrun Crossfire. And so I didn't feel like Shadowrun Crossfire was much of a deck builder. I would have called this another tactical card game with deck building elements like Baseball Highlights 2045, 13th mention.
Is that the new thing? Are we going to track the number of mentions?
We're done. We're good. So yeah, I played the Duke. I own the Duke. The Duke is fantastic. I still don't know if I like the Duke more or Onitama more.
I like Onitama.
Yeah, I know you do. But yeah, so I wasn't crazy about Shadowrun Crossfire. I like the Shadowrun universe well enough. I was never a big fan of it. I never put in the RPGs for it, but I did play the Shadowrun card game, which was it just called Shadowrun CCG? I can't remember. Anyway, so yeah, I don't know if I'm necessarily super excited about this. So what happens in this game, Alex?
So here's the description as we have it so far. In Dragonfire, players choose from a number of races, from dwarf to elf, half-orc to human, while assuming the quintessential roles of cleric, rogue, fighter, and wizard. Equipped with weapons, spells, and magic items, players begin their adventure along the famed Sword Coast, then expand to other locales across the Forgotten Realms, such as Baldur's Gate, Neverwinter, and Waterdeep in future expansions. Along the way, players level up their characters, opening access to additional equipment, feats, and more. Join the quest and build your own legend.
So I would definitely try this. I think I like the Forgotten Realms theme a little bit more than Shadowrun, so I would definitely be willing to try this. But it's got a lot to prove to me, I think.
No release date for this one just yet, but it is in development and has been announced. Next up, Legendary X-Men. Sean, what are we talking about here?
We're talking about a true deck builder now, Alex.
Oh.
Have you played Legendary?
I have.
Okay.
A long time ago. So I own Legendary Marvel, right? I don't own any of the expansions for it. I've played Legendary Encounters or Aliens, and I think it's fantastic. I think it's so good. Legendary Marvel, I enjoy a lot. I like this system. It's a very simple system. There's a little bit of like a tactical board element to it. Not as much as, say, Tyrants of the Underdark or Clank, but enough to kind of give you a feel for that. The hard part has always been setting up this game, because you have to have a bunch of different heroes you shuffle together, a bunch of different villains and things like that. And so it doesn't come out that much. I have moved away from deck builders. I've kind of talked about this before, unless that deck builder is doing something else, right? So, but this sounds pretty cool. This is going to have a bunch of new characters: Psylocke, Beast, Banshee, Cannonball, Dazzler, Legion, and some more. Total 15 new heroes, 6 new villain groups, 6 new masterminds, and 4 henchmen. There's also going to be some new mechanics. So, for example, there are these heroic bystanders. So there's a line of cards, a galley of cards that are these enemies you have to fight, but sometimes bystanders will get captured by some of them. And so when you kill the villain that has that bystander, you kind of free that bystander and it's worth some points, if I'm remembering that correctly. But here, there are heroic bystanders who, I guess, get added to your deck and can help you out. So yeah, I'd be interesting to try this. This is supposed to be their biggest legendary expansion to date. It's got almost 400 cards. So it sounds like this could be a standalone, I think. And I don't know that I'd rush out to buy it, but I'd certainly be excited to play this and try it. I'm sure Empire will get a copy. And that's going to be hitting stores in June next month
2017. Yeah.
Next month.
Next month.
Yep.
We both are saying the same thing. I don't know why this is an issue.
Next month. All right.
June 2017.
Yes. Finally, we always like to talk about a Kickstarter each week, and this one's kind of an interesting one because it's a relaunch. This is Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. It's a Kickstarter relaunch put out by Gameland Games. Gameland, you know from the Tiny Epic series, Tiny Epic Western, Tiny Epic Galaxies, Tiny Epic Quest. Take your pick.
So, Alex.
Yes.
This game is not tiny.
No.
But is it epic?
Apparently, it's big epic. And oddly enough, I remember this one. I didn't go back and listen to the interview, but I do remember Scott Alms. I did an interview with him for one of our Patreon interviews. By the way, we just dropped a Patreon interview. We haven't talked about this.
Go on.
No.
Well, by all means.
Hang on. This is a perfect time.
Sure, I know. Go for it.
I should have done that in show business, too. Forgotten as always. All right. So every month, as part of a Patreon stretch goal, we do, or I do in this case, Ducal I, do an interview with someone in board gaming, whether it be a publisher, designer. We're trying to expand that out out a little bit, but previous guests have included Tom Vassell, Scott Alms, who I was just mentioning, did an interview with him. And he mentions this game that we were just talking about, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. I don't know if he mentions it by name or if he just mentioned it by concept, that he was working on a 4X game of some kind. In any case, this is that. However, just a little tangent, little train to the side. Before leaving for my trip, I did an interview at the very last second with a very courteous Jamie Stegmaier, or as he will soon be known as, Jamie Chocolate Decadence Stegmaier. You have to listen to the interview if you want to hear that, which you can now listen to.
Yeah.
Because 3.5, 4-ish months later, it now is published and available to the public.
To be fair, it was supposed to publish in March.
Okay.
So it's only like 6 weeks late.
Fine. Okay. I had some scoops, Sean. I did some journalism. I did some board gaming journalism.
You had
on that.
Vague little bit of information about the new Scythe expansion, the second expansion with the airships.
Yeah.
Which he didn't really go into detail or have a name, but yeah. So
that's out with some lovely director's commentary from Sean.
Yeah.
Go download it, listen to it, let me know what you think. But yeah, everyone should be calling Jamie Stegmaier Chocolate Decadence from now on.
Sorry, Jamie.
No, I'm not sorry about that at all. That was a good answer to that question, by the way. My favorite interview question ever, which... Go listen to the Patreon interview series and you'll know what that question is.
All right.
In any case, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. So this is a 4X game to loop way back around. It is designed by Scott Alms, who is known for the Tiny Epic series. Also did, I can't remember the name of it. It was a dexterity game with a plane that you had to drop and the plane would land certain places.
Yeah, I can't remember.
I don't remember offhand.
Has that come out yet?
I think the Kickstarter's completed, but I don't know if the game itself is released.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was on Kickstarter.
Any case, so...
Glad we're so informative.
Yeah, and we're still not really talking about this Kickstarter, which is great.
Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea.
Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, which launched as a Kickstarter, then was pulled at some point, and then is being relaunched. Sean, do we know the story behind this?
We do. And in fact, I kind of sourced this out to our local Slack group. So we've got 2 Slack groups, Alex. So if you're a member of Patreon, there's a Patreon Slack channel that you can belong to. And then for some of our locals that helped... Wait, you can go on a tangent, but I can't?
It's just behind the scenes. It's fine. Go ahead.
No, but the community that came together while you were gone to help me put this podcast together.
It takes a village.
Yes, it takes a village. Anyway, so they were talking about this the other day, and I asked them, I said, hey, remind me again what was going on with this particular Kickstarter. So apparently this is like the second or third incarnation of this Kickstarter. Super confusing, multiple different pledge levels before. There were standees for the figures instead of miniatures. They've simplified a lot of the different pledge levels. And I think that's one concern I will usually have. Like, I was like, well, what am I supposed to back here? So the first one, my understanding was there was a problem with how they had calculated shipping. And so they canceled it. Otherwise they would have lost a ton of money. And then the last one had fully funded. And I guess that was a bit of a problem for people, fully funded. And then they canceled it. Right. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting point. So here we are, the third, maybe second attempt, depending on how you want to look at it. The price has been lowered. And if you want to look at the update from the last campaign, it kind of gives you an idea of what the differences are.
Right.
Which is a little confusing. But so kind of an interesting history here, especially for a company that has had great success on Kickstarter. But I think the kind of learning curve here for them may have been, we're dealing with smaller productions, these tiny epic games, and now we've got this big box. And shipping is a nightmare.
And the minis. I would imagine the minis.
Well, minis now, yeah.
Correct. So to back this one now, if you want the core set, that's going to be $79 pledge. If you want the deluxe set, that's going to be $139 pledge. And those are sort of the more simplified pledge levels. There's just 2. So take a peek at that. So the game itself, here's the description. It's a 4X game for 1 to 6 players. Plays in about 2 to 3 hours is the idea. Features 80 highly detailed minis and over 30 constructs. It can play up to 6 with deluxe expansion, and it's being pitched as something that's easy to learn. After all, it's a Scott Alms design, so there's going to be some degree of mechanical elegance to it that Scott Alms brings to his productions. And I think that should be quite nice. As far as I can tell in terms of the theming of this, effectively you're warring across a number of islands in giant boats that you can put your armies onto and sail across and do battle. It looks pretty cool.
It does look pretty cool. Yeah,
Are you going to back this one, Sean? Normally anything with minis definitely can get a little edge sometimes with you.
I'm going to put it on my 48-hour watch.
Okay.
In other words, I'll get a reminder from Kickstarter 48 hours before it ends.
All right, let's pretend it's 48 hours before it ends now. Are you backing it or are you not backing it?
What does that even mean? I don't know yet. I haven't decided
Which way are you leaning?
No. If you're going to put me on the spot like this, then no.
Then why is that?
I have to think about it. I got to look at my Kickstarter schedule. I got to look what else is funding.
$79 core, $139 deluxe.
Yeah, I think it's probably a bit too pricey for my taste. Okay, once again, here's my ongoing Kickstarter policy. If it's a cool mini or not game, it doesn't matter. Otherwise, I tend to stay in the $20 to $30, $40 range, with some exceptions.
Now, does the designer and the company help tip the balance here? Because it's Gamelin, who's put out a lot of stuff you like, and it's Scott Alms, who's put out a lot of stuff you like. Does that tip the scales at all towards maybe being a yes?
That price point is tough. It really is. So, for example, recently, I have backed Hardback. I've backed King's Champion, Ladder 29, the Gloomhaven second printing, Empires of the Void, Rising Sun, which was kind of an expensive thing. So, yeah, as of right now, and Brass. I have both Brass games backed. So I don't think so.
Okay.
But I'm interested to try this. It's something I might pick up at retail. Are there Kickstarter exclusives on this? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Excellent.
I don't really look at these as thoroughly as you do because I don't look at Kickstarter as thoroughly as you do. In any case, this one is close to meeting its funding goal. It has 31 days left. The pledge goal, and this is, I do appreciate this, it's $250,000 for the pledge goal. So it's not one of these that funds almost immediately because the pledge goal is set too low. This one hasn't quite funded yet. It hasn't quite hit that. It's at $228,000 as of this podcast recording. May have already funded by the time this episode's released. We'll find out.
So as a Kickstarter exclusive, you can add $25 to your pledge to get pre-painted minis, which isn't bad. That's not bad at all. The minis on this are, I think, decent looking. I don't think these are actual minis on the page. I think it's 3D renders, I think. I mean, the components look really sweet. Oh, if you want that, so it's $25 for the base game. If you want to do pre-painted minis on the deluxe game, it's $50.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a lot. I think it looks really cool. I really do. I think the minis look good. It's really rough. Bunch of stretch goals already added. Let's talk to me again 48 hours before it ends.
All right. Fair enough.
Right now, it's a no.
Which is in a few weeks from now. So you have 31 days left to back this. Check it out. That's Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea. And that is a look at the news.
In these turbulent times, you can't just let yourself become adrift in the flow of history. Instead, you need to
Wait. Hang on.
Yeah.
Aside from your presidential speech here, Sean, and this is an Independence Day, so ease up. That sounded like an interesting name for a game there, Flow of History. Is that being done yet?
Yeah, but there's no aliens involved like Independence Day.
Oh, okay.
So Flow of History is yet another innovative game designed from Taiwanese designer Jesse Lee, who also designed Ponzi Scheme. This is a civilization game where players are developing their nation using a unique bidding and price-setting mechanism to purchase new cards. But what is paid to the supply might also be harvested into the pockets of other players later, which puts a bit of a twist on your strategy for bidding and also cleverly simulates an economic inflation for the game.
Flow of History is up on Indiegogo right now through May 26th. It's being done by Tasty Minstrel Games. You can check out that game and all of TMG's awesome titles at playtmg.com. All right, this week we're talking about a train game. You say you want a revolution, but is this a revolution that goes to its final destination or straight off the tracks? It's Railroad Revolution.
Ambition and a thirst for wealth have driven humanity to strive for ever greater progress. In America, during the 19th century, battles were waged between huge railway corporations that sought to connect state to state and coast with coast, making themselves filthy rich in the process. Railroad Revolution drops you straight into the middle of these tempestuous years, a time that changed America forever.
Railroad Revolution, published by What's Your Game, designed by Marco Canetta and Stefania Niccolini. In it, the object of that game is to score the most points by making connections to the far-flung western cities, establishing train stations throughout the U.S., and by investing in the Western Union Corporation.
Players start with a certain number of unbuilt rails and station houses on their player board, along with money, shares in the Western Union Corporation, and 4 basic workers. Players will also start with an initial rail line connecting Washington, D.C. and Charlotte, North Carolina. Hey, Marty and Tony.
Throughout the game, players will take turns placing one of their workers on their player board to take one of 4 actions.
1, players can either establish a train station in the city their rail network is connected to by paying the costs associated with that city.
2, players can purchase and place rails to extend their train network.
Number 3, they can make an investment in the Western Union Corporation by placing one of their stations in the Western Union section of the board, thereby earning shares in the company.
And number 4, and finally, players can sell off unbuilt roads and stations to earn some money and flip some of their engines, usually for some kind of bonus effect.
Almost all of these actions will trigger some kind of bonus resulting in money, Western Union shares, and new workers, among other things. Often, the first player to play stations will receive some additional bonus as well.
Additional workers come in 4 varieties: gray, orange, turquoise, and purple. When these different colored workers are used to take one of the 4 main actions, the player will get a bonus dependent on the type of action taken and the color of the worker used.
So, for example, if I use an orange worker to place a train station on the map, I don't have to pay that city cost.
And if I use a gray worker on the Western Union track, I'll get to take the first to place bonus again, even if another player is already there.
So as players take actions, they may receive bonuses that provide bumps in any of the 3 multiplier tracks that will give players more and more points for placing items on the board. Players can also complete milestones during the game that have certain requirements for certain types of connections or train stations in certain levels of cities. Once these are completed, players will get a more difficult milestone that's also worth more points at the end of the game.
Once one player has placed a certain number of their rails and stations, the end game will trigger. The current round will be completed, then an additional final round will be played. Then you add up the points on the handy-dandy score pad. Most points is the winner, and that is pretty much how you play Railroad Revolution.
Yeah, I actually don't think we missed too much in there other than specific bonuses for different
nuances,
workers.
Endgame scoring, how that all quite melds together. But yeah, for the most part, it's a pretty good primer on the game.
So I will point out that the designers of the game, Marco Canetta and Stefania Niccolini, were the designers of Zhanguo, another What's Your Game game. And I love Zhanguo, and so I was very excited for this game because, again, a design team that I'm excited about. So I'll go first. I don't usually go first with general impressions, but yeah, I think this is a really solid game. In fact, it plays a lot quicker than I thought it would. These What's Your Games are, I would say, more on the heavy medium end. So you've got games like Madeira, Nippon, Zhanguo, Signori, all I'd probably classify somewhere in there, and all games that I like quite a bit. What's Your Game is probably one of my favorite publishers because all of the games of theirs that I've played, we'll leave this out for now because I don't want to spoil anything about this, but all of the previous games of theirs that I've played, and I own 5 or 6 of them, are really solid and ones that I really enjoy. So certainly I was excited for them. There's a lot of opportunities in this game to feel clever. There's a lot of cool comboing effects. It might seem to play out a little bit too quickly, which could be a plus or minus depending on how you're looking at it. I think just because of my perception of the types of games this company makes, I expected something a little bit longer, but I'm wondering if that is a plus in your column.
So my initial thoughts on this are, I am glad, actually really glad, this is the first game I'm doing a featured review on the way back. And Sean, you may think I'm being sarcastic about this. I'm actually legitimately not being sarcastic about this.
Okay, all right.
The reason I say that is when we first started off this podcast, a large part of what we thought was going to be the appeal was a tendency to disagree on things.
Sure.
We even had a segment called Game Court where we specifically took a game in there and you had one side, I had another. We tore it apart or defended it and went from there. As time's gone on, if you looked at our top 10 list for this past year or some of our reviews, our scores have tended to be more similar at times. I think a lot of that has been my growth as a gamer, my evolution as a gamer, less so than you changing. I think it's been more my perspective changing on things.
I'm a stick in the mud.
I can be too. But what I think is nice is when we have differences on a game.
Sure.
And I think this is going to be a game where we're going to have some significant differences. And that's why I'm excited to talk about this one. So here's the thing to me, Sean. I think mechanically, the vast majority of what's here is actually really sound. And I like a lot of what it does. For instance, I like how it has turns structured. We didn't talk about this in the rules explanation because it's a nuanced thing where you can do things in any order.
Right.
So you can do something where a lot of times in game, if you need to have money to pay for an action and the action you're taking gets you the money that you could use to pay for it, you can't do that. You have to have the prerequisite ahead of time. This game effectively lets you execute your turn in any order, it opens up gameplay in a nice way. And I actually wish more games would implement that. I think that's a cool little twist in this game. And there are elements to this that tend to work really well. But in the most recent play I had of this, Sean, I forced endgame. And I didn't force endgame because I thought it was the best for me to do gameplay-wise. I kind of did. I had a sense, I thought you were further ahead. I didn't really know where Nick was. I didn't know where I was in the mix. A big part of the reason I ended it was I just wasn't having a ton of fun playing this one.
Interesting.
I just wasn't engaged with it. And I think there are reasons for why that was that we can discuss a little bit further as we dig deeper into this one. So that's my initial thoughts are there's a lot of good sound gameplay. And I think this, if you tend to align more with Sean's tastes as far as games go, I think you're going to be more likely to like this one. If you align more with my tastes, I think for reasons that'll become apparent, you might not dig this one as much. So that's where we'll start from.
Okay, fair enough. So I will say this. I will say right now that What's Your games I've played, this is probably my least favorite.
Interesting.
Now, that's not necessarily saying a whole lot. It's just saying I like Madeira better. I like Signore better. I like Nippon better, etc. There is one game, Asgard. Is it called Asgard? I haven't played that yet. It's the same designers as Signore. I have it upstairs. Just haven't played it. Need to play it. Anyway, my point is that I like this a decent amount. I like it quite a bit. I'll say quite a bit, but I'm not completely gaga over it. But I still think I'm going to like it quite a bit more than you by the time this is all said and done.
I think so. So rulebook, Sean, and props to Paul Grogan.
Oh, man, Paul Grogan.
Show.
Yeah.
So, Sean, how does this one stack up to other What's Your Game rulebooks?
I love their rulebooks. First off, Paul helped in that process. Paul also did a fantastic gaming rules vid on Railroad Revolution. Highly recommend people go check that out. What I love about What's Your Game rulebooks is they break stuff down into color-coded sections, right? So you know what I'm talking about. This action, it's all this particular color. Then when I go to the next action, it changes or something to that effect. I love it. There's nice little call-out boxes when it's different for 2 or 3 players. There are some variants in the version 3 rulebook. So now this is going to be one of the issues. So the rulebook that came in the box, I may reference from time to time, but I never actually read it. I read the rulebook on my iPad because I was able to download version 3 from Board Game Geek. Version 3 cleans up a couple things, but it also has 2 variants, which I think are really important. Variant number 1 is that whenever you complete a milestone, and so you start the game with 2 different A's. When you complete an A, you get a B. Then B to C, C to D, D is end of the line, so to speak. So the original rule is when you complete an A, you draw 3 from the top of the B deck and you pick 1. Paul Grogan's suggestion was you just go through the whole thing and pick one that you want because there's a good deal of luck there. You may get one that you have like 15% completed, but then the next player may get one that's like 80% completed. And just from sheer luck. So here there's a little bit of maybe a race to get ones that you want. I like that. The other major variant the version 3 rulebook adds is increasing certain price to move up on the Western Union track. So we referenced that there are these 3 multiplier tracks. So they give you different amounts of points depending on how far you move up each of them. Number 1 for stations on the Western Union section, 2 for stations on the map, and then 3 for all of the westernmost level 5 cities that you're connected to. And when you go to certain bumps, you have to turn in a Western Union share. You have to pay a worker, whatever. In the original game, when you go from like the 3rd to last or 4th to last to the next one and then the next one, you have to pay $50, $50, then $100. That is no sweat off anyone's back. That is super easy to accomplish. When you and it may make the Western Union track and scoring too strong.
It helped me. We played without the variant in our first game together of this, and I smashed.
And I wanted to play it with just that first. All my subsequent games were with the modification. The modification changes it to 500, 500, 1,000.
And it balances it out. It actually balances out the game.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I think that's solid. So I would say if you're going to pick up this game, make sure you have access to the version 1.3 rulebook and make sure you play with those variants. I think they're really strong. I think that's the way the game should be played. So, which is kind of an interesting, I mean, I suspect that's something you would have an issue with typically.
Oh, always. Yeah. And we talked about this too, where I think it was with Praetor maybe, where they had a fix for the exploit you got through.
Oh, yeah.
But if it's in people's hands and out there on the table already, and not every consumer is going to go to Board Game Geek and look for the newest variants and look for the newest ways to play something if it's not right in there. And so I don't want to speak too much on this because I don't know, is the version that we have the retail version, the version that most people are going to see?
Yeah.
Okay, then yeah, that's an issue. And I think it's probably a little out of balance without the variants. The first variant you mentioned, I think it just plays better. If
the milestones.
The milestones. If you can go through the milestone deck because of the nature of how you complete those. I think that makes way more sense to me. And the 500, 500, 1,000 just for pure balancing makes more sense to me too. So yeah, it's a little iffy that you have to kind of retcon that and throw that in there. The game is not broke, but here's the difference between what Praetor did in this. Praetor is broken without that fix.
Yeah.
This is not broken without that fix.
One path is a little bit too overpowered.
Sure. But the nature of this game, and we'll talk about this more in gameplay, is there's not a ton you can do to block other people.
True. I would say that the primary interaction is when you initiate deals, which we didn't even talk about in the rules overview, which we can go into when we talk a little bit about gameplay.
Sure.
Any other thoughts on this whole rulebook issue?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a bummer when something has to be retconned after the fact, and I'm sure that's as frustrating for the publisher as it is for anyone. But yeah, I think it's a knock against the game. But it didn't play a significant factor in my ultimate score, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's fair. So the components art on this game, often in the past, you have kind of poo-pooed the What's Your Game boards.
Yep.
The way they look.
The look of the games, yeah.
And I've been a staunch defender of them. I love how Madeira looks. I love how Zangwo looks. I love how Signori looks. Yeah, I don't like this board that much, Alex.
Yeah, not a fan.
It's kind of drab. I get what they're going. They're kind of going for like Old West style parchment paper look. Maybe not parchment paper, but just kind of like those Western paintings you might see. I don't know if that's a good description, but it's functional. I think it's a very functional board.
Sure.
I think the iconography is clear. There are a couple things you just kind of have to pick up on. And the components are good quality cardboard stock, lots of different meeples, rails. It's like kind of the classic Catan houses and roads for the rails. I think it's solid. One thing that I've always noticed with What's Your Game boards from a physical standpoint is there's a good amount of warping, and that's just been consistent across the board. So anyway, yeah, I think it's a solid production with the exception of the board warping, which is a known quantity. I mean, I knew it was going to happen. I'm like, I'll open this up and the board's going to be warped. It's just going to happen. And so I've got to kind of like fold it and along the creases to try and flatten it out. More so than most.
So on the plus side of this one, for me, the player boards. I actually think the player boards are really clean, well-designed, and tell you what each action does, which given that there's 16 different action spaces on your board.
Well, there's 4.
Kind of, with different flavors.
Yeah.
And actually, technically speaking, 5 different flavors of each action, because you also have the base action, which is send someone to accomplish a goal.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of stuff going on that player board, but it's handled really well, and I think done pretty well. But yeah, this doesn't change my impression of the What's Your Game look of things. I said with Signori, I kind of was almost put to sleep by the look of that one.
Oh, I love how Signori looks.
And I don't even think Nippon I liked as a game a lot, but the look of it I wasn't such a big fan of. This is one where it just doesn't. And we'll talk more about this with theme. I hate to do this. We'll talk more about. It doesn't engage me in this as much thematically, and I think part of that's the look of the game.
Is that maybe your television news background? There may be something poisoning your children. We'll tell you at 11.
After the break, yeah, we're at 11, right. All right, so yeah, not a huge plus, but I'd say the rest of it's pretty solid. I agree with you, the iconography's not bad when you understand the language of the game.
Sure.
Let's go to gameplay innovation here, Sean. What does this do well as far as the gameplay?
Well, like I said, I mean, one of the things I like in a lot of Euros is when there's some cool combo play, when you can do things that you wouldn't expect to be able to do and it makes you feel clever. I love that. I absolutely love that. And I think that this game has plenty of that. And it's a difficult decision. So not only is it, and kind of like you were alluding to before, not only is it, well, which of the 4 main actions do I want to use? But at a certain point in the game, you have upgraded your basic white workers into a bunch of oranges and purples and whatever. And so you have to decide, okay, well, which version of the action do I want to take? Do I want to take the purple version, which is, going to get me this particular bonus? But then I can't use that purple worker other space where I need that bonus. And what's cool too is you keep placing your workers on until they're all on your board. Once they're all on your board, you then take them off and you immediately get to reuse them. So you don't want necessarily a bunch of workers or even any of your basic workers because you actually want to get rid of them throughout the game. There are ways to kind of cull your worker collection. And so I like that. I like that managing your workforce is a strong part of the game, which you don't necessarily see in a lot of other action selection games. So like, for example, in the pawn, you have all these different color workers. It's action, instead of action selection, it's kind of action, or instead of worker placement, it's like reverse worker placement because you're taking workers. Those different colored workers don't have any effect other than some accounting at the end of once you consolidate. Here, they're doing something very different. And I really enjoy that. I think that can be a little bit overwhelming at first. You can kind of get tunnel vision to focus on what you need to do. I need to accomplish this action. This particular worker is going to help me do that in a certain way while still leaving these other workers to do other things. That workforce management I thought was fantastic.
There's an interesting component to that management as well. And I like a lot of the elements of it. I like how fluid it is. I like how if you place an orange guy on this space, it doesn't necessarily block other spaces. That orange guy you can also use for a base action if you need to complete an objective. You can send folks from any place, either your available worker pool or your board pool, to accomplish objectives. it does a lot of things to take away the normal restrictions you might have on a game like this. So this is an interesting contention. I don't know where you stand on this one, Sean. To me, I was a little frustrated with how the goals worked in the game. I like the variant twist where you can look through the entire stack and pick what you like. It just felt like they were so tricky to accomplish while doing other things. It felt like such a hard path to victory, and it almost felt, I don't know if tacked on is quite the right way to say it, but it just didn't. I was more frustrated by that piece of it than engaged by it.
I think I'll disagree with you on that. I think that this is a game that offers multiple paths to victory. I think that you could play a game that focuses just on these milestones. And I think that they're done in such a way that you can find a B that will build on the A that you've already been working on and a C that builds on the B. You just need to make sure that those are still in there. Okay, so on these milestones, there's basically two components. One will say you need to build a certain number of stations in a level 1 city or level 2 city. Basically, there's 2 cities on the east that are level 1s, then you go a little bit west and they're level 2s, and then level 3s, 4s, 5s, all the way on the west coast. And then it might say, okay, so in addition to building one level 1, also be connected to 2 different level 2 cities. And then, when all that's said and done, you need to then assign one of your workers. Basically, this worker's getting promoted to management and a specific color of worker. And so there's a base action that lets you promote a worker. There's some other ways to promote multiple workers at a time. Once you have the right worker or workers, as they get harder, you need multiple workers. Once they're assigned, then you complete it. You're going to score those points at the end of the game, and then you get to upgrade to a new milestone. And I spent one game where I was heavily concentrating on the milestones, and you can score like 80, 90 points from it, but you're foregoing doing other things. And I don't think it's necessarily a weaker option. I think it's a strong path to victory that you can choose to follow.
What makes it a bit of a weaker option, at least from my experience playing this, is because at least even as early as the A's and, well, as early as the B's, you need 2 workers of specific colors.
Right.
And I think the D's, actually, you can have 2 workers of any kind to accomplish some of those.
So.
At least some of them I've seen. The fact that you need 2 workers of specific colors and you have a work pool limitation that you can't have fewer than 4 at any given time.
Sure.
That combo of things can make things awfully tricky because you have to engineer your game around getting that specific color of workers, which can be rewarding.
Yeah.
I think if they'd done it was a worker of one specific color and a worker of any color to accomplish a B-level goal, I might be a little less frustrated with it. But it feels a little too constrained as it is, at least for those B-level requirements. If those kinds of heavy requirements were there on a D level or even a C level,
sure,
I don't think I'd have as big of an issue with it. But it felt like you get jammed up. You hit a wall right at those B-level goals.
Well, I think it just depends. So I think for me, I mean, when you look at it in the games that I've played, scores have ranged between, I'd say, 120 and like 180. And if you score 90 points, it's not, you, in theory, you can complete 8 milestones in the game. I think that's really difficult. I'm just saying that's the most you could complete. But if you complete like 5 of them, you're going to score like 90 plus points. Probably a little bit more. And so that's a good chunk of points. And in addition, some of those things that you're having to do are going to get you some other points as well. If you're high enough on certain multipliers. And so it might be that in a particular game, I'm lower on the multiplier track than you might be. And I'm only scoring some incidental points, but I'm scoring 90 points to your 50 points. I don't know. I understand your frustration. I didn't feel frustrated by it.
It was more that B-level wall. I think if that was a little bit easier in terms of the personnel you have to assign there, it probably isn't as big of a deal for me. But it just feels like you get jammed up, and I wanted to get to those higher level goals and see what was there and get to that point.
Yeah.
It was hard to get to that point. The gameplay I was playing was steering me in a different direction. And maybe that's just from my experiences playing it. Maybe in future experiences I play it a little bit differently. But it felt like for me, you hit that B-level wall, and I was a little frustrated with that.
Okay. So the other thing that I like the milestones is some of them require you to have certain rails and certain types of terrain, which goes back to building the rail action. So basically, you're allowed to put 2 rails out at a time for $400. But then every time one of those spaces contains these little mountain symbols, you have to spend an extra $100. And so some of them have 1, some have 2, some have 3. So that can get pretty pricey. But I like there's like a lot of rail games out there, you're having to pay for these tracks to expand your network, and it's dependent on terrain, which is, I think, thematic, but I'm getting ahead of myself there. So I definitely enjoy that whole network building, which is something I wouldn't have enjoyed like 2 years ago. I've grown on network building some, as my recent play of 1846 would attest to.
I like network building a lot, too.
Sure.
I like how network building, though, is done in something like Ticket to Ride or Power Grid versus this. And I think the reason may be twofold. The big reason, I think, is because, and we sort of talked about this, but at least as far as building rails goes, there's no limit to how many people can build on any one spot. And there's no, as far as the rails go, no benefit to being the first to build in a spot.
Correct.
So because of that lack of limitation, that lack of restriction there, which is a good design element in other pieces of the game, that piece of it feels less rewarding to me as you're building out the network.
So the game isn't mean enough for Alex. That's weird. It's
more that some benefit for building out there first. For instance, the ability to trigger deals if you're the first person to hit that deal spot, as opposed to the way the rule works where anyone who builds a rail in that spot triggers a deal. If you trigger a deal, and we haven't talked about this thoroughly, let's do that now. There are these little deal cards which come into play at various times. Often, I think there's some stations that trigger them, but primarily it's when you're building a rail or when you're building a Western Union depot.
Right.
On that deal spot, you as the player to trigger it can do the top one or the bottom one or both, a la Scythe. This game is very much like Scythe, Sean. No. Then in turn order, everyone else can pick either the top or the bottom. So as the player triggering the deal, you get the benefit of getting a little bit of potentially both if you have the shares for it.
And it costs some amount of Western Union shares.
Right.
This is your primary way to spend these, although at any time during your turn, you can turn them in for money. Or actually, any time of your turn, I think it's any time, you can turn them in each for $150. But primarily you want to hold on to these to do these deals because they give you extra actions when it's not your turn.
And that's something I like about the game, by the way, is that you can be engaged off of your turn because someone might trigger a deal and all of a sudden you're doing something interesting ahead of your turn, something maybe that you didn't expect to be able to do.
Yeah.
Which can lead to some cool play. So I enjoy that piece of things.
I also enjoy looking out for what position my opponents are in to capitalize on a deal, right? So maybe I'm not willing to take an action that's going to initiate a deal because everyone has a bunch of shares and they can do whatever they want. Or maybe I realize, oh, everyone's out or close to being out of shares. I wasn't going to take this action this turn, but I'm in a pretty good position to kind of cut them out and be less efficient. In fact, the last game you and I played last night at 3 players, I chose different final 2 actions because I didn't want to give you deals. I didn't want to help you at all. And I figured, well, I'm going to net a few less points, but it would be a benefit to me to do that. So
maybe you needed those points though, Sean, because that last game we played, the final score of it, 163, 162, 161.
Yeah, I came in last.
But by 2 points.
2 points. No, but what I'm saying is you would have had more points than that anyway.
Well, that would have been nice. I would have liked to win.
Yeah.
I finished second.
Yeah.
I was in the middle there. That was an unimaginably close game.
Yeah.
Oof.
It's pretty crazy.
Yeah, that was pretty nuts. So, yeah, I'm trying to think in terms of gameplay, and it's hard to totally put the finger on this for me. And I've mentioned some of the elements that were sort of didn't grab me and pull me in as much. I just didn't find the network building of this, I guess, as rewarding. There's certainly the first placement bonus, which can be very useful depending on how you do it. But there's enough ways around that where you play a gray worker on a space and you get that first placement bonus anyway.
Sure.
Now, that first placement bonus can be used to double up with that gray worker, which I think is pretty cool too. For me, in that sense, it didn't feel super interactive. There's the interactive element of the deals. There's the interactive element of who gets first to this spot. But other than that, there's not really a way to affect what someone else is doing through the network building. Does that make sense?
I think that makes sense.
So in that sense, maybe it's because it feels a little more solitaire-esque than similar games, but the interaction just wasn't there as much. And maybe I was craving that, but it felt very much, certainly in that last game we were playing, like I was in my own world.
What'd you think about the playtime of this?
It got better once everyone knew what they were doing.
Sure.
The initial play that we got in with 4 was maybe a little long, but then again, we had to look up rules, different things pop up, you don't quite know how the game plays. It flowed really well with 3 players, and I actually don't think it ended too soon. I like the length that it was at.
Yeah. So I played this 2 player. So I played this at all 2, 3, and 4 player counts. And 2 player with Raquel, we moved along pretty snappy. In fact, our 3 player game was pretty snappy. I think I actually would prefer to play this at 4. And maybe because even though I'm getting the same amount of play, it just felt more fulfilling. It just felt like, even though really that's more downtime for me, I feel like I would prefer to play this at 4, but I certainly want to turn down at 3 or 2 for that matter. So is this a thematic game in your mind, Alex?
Not really.
I mean, as much as a rail game can be.
I suppose, but I get way more, and I don't know why this is, but I get way more thematically out of something like, say, Ticket to Ride. Again, not the same type of game or flavor of game by any means, but that building of connections, that looking for this kind of card to fill in. And in, say, Ticket to Ride Europe, the cards for ferries or for tunnels, those kinds of experiences I feel. This one tries to have a bit of that with the different grades of you're trying to build these hills. It might be a really steep hill and you have to pay more to build that. I just never felt it at any point. And maybe it was the look of the game. I didn't feel the theme of this one as much, Sean. And I don't know why. And for instance, what is it, Age of Steam?
Yeah.
I felt the theme of that one more than I felt with this.
Interesting.
So it just, to me, as far as a train game goes, it's definitely a train game. You're doing the network building, you're building the stations. Maybe it's the Western Union element that didn't feel super tied into me for whatever reason. I know the story in the background of the game, it makes sense. It just didn't come together for me, if that makes any...
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, it just didn't come together.
No, yeah, that's fair. I think that's
where
fair.
Where do you fit thematically on this?
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you for the most part. I mean, there was no narrative, but there was certainly, like I said, it's a rail game, so it's not that difficult to make the actions sync up with what they represent. You know what I mean? So, yeah. Well, let's go to some final thoughts, Alex. Let's have you go first since you haven't given final thoughts in a while.
I haven't, and I'm not properly prepared, Sean. Oh my God. I don't know what am I supposed to do?
1 through 6, Alex.
Okay. 1 means it's poorly designed, but playable, not necessarily fun. 6 means it's an all-time favorite that's a contender for the top 10. We rate games on a 6-point scale. No half points allowed, except for the times when we allow half points.
Which are never.
But I'll give them every now and then.
Well, I usually edit those out.
Oh, do you?
No, not really.
No.
But I could.
He talks a big game with editing stuff out, but he doesn't actually do it.
Oh man.
Yeah.
You just opened a whole can of something you're not ready for.
Oh no.
Just wait when you least expect it, Alex.
Oh boy. And that means I'll have to actually listen to the episodes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That's not happening.
Oh, okay. So let's talk 2, 3, and 4 in terms of where those are on the scale.
You think this could be as low as a 2?
I'm talking about all of them.
All right.
So a 2's description is game has some merit, but has some significant flaws to it. And typically the dividing line between a 2 and a 3 is a 2 is a game you won't play again. If it's on the table and it's being offered, you'll say, no, I'm going to pass. Like, this isn't happening. A 3 is game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation. So, yeah, I'll play this, but I'm kind of meh on it. You know, if it's in the collection, great. If it's not, it's fine. There's plenty of other stuff I can play. A 4 is a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. And I think where this one ends up falling is closer to a 2 than a 4. So it's in the 3.
Okay.
And I'm going to give it ultimately a 3. Okay. I think the design of it and how the different flavors of workers play in and some of the free-flowing nature of how turns are structured, I like all of that and how that works. And I don't think there's necessarily anything fundamentally wrong with the design of the game. For me, I just didn't have a ton of fun with it. Now, that being said, here's the situation I would play it again in. And this is the right situation argument. If it's already set up and I'm playing with people who know what they're doing.
Okay.
And in that case, I might say, yeah, sure, I'll play it. But I'll tell you, it's on the lower end of a 3 for me.
Interesting.
It's dangerously close to a 2. And I think it's some of that's little issues here and there. Some of it's just not being engaged. And some of it's the bottom line, the broader story of this game for me, as much as it has some individual elements I really like, it didn't come in together into a package where I was excited towards the end and I was anticipating the end. I was just ending it to end it. And I think for that reason, it's on the lower end. We'll call it a 3, but close to a 2. So That's where I fall on this one. Sean, I'm going to imagine you're going to be a little higher on this.
I'm going to be a bit higher. So I would say that prior to this, every single What's Your Game that I have played has been at least a 5 or a 6. This is going to be the first 4. It's a good game, worth playing, just not all the time. Belongs in the duchy. I'm happy to have this in my collection. This is, in a lot of ways, it captures some of the heavier rail games, but in a more simplified way. And I think that ultimately this is kind of a medium game. Would you agree? You wouldn't call it medium heavy, would you?
Medium heavy-ish.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, a little trend there. Yeah, it pushes slightly above medium. I don't know if I call it straight medium.
Okay. Yeah, I'd probably call it straight medium. And yeah, I think it's a lot of fun. I think there are plenty of times for me to feel clever. I think there's some decent variability here. I'm excited to explore different strategies. Well, I feel like I've explored the different paths to victory already in the plays I've had. I'm excited to get better at them and to figure out ways to really maximize them. Like this last game we played, for example, I put so much effort into completely maxing out those early multiplier tracks, right? And yeah, I think it's a solid game, a 4. Good game, worth playing just all the time, belongs in the duchy. All right, well, that's going to do it for the Duke's review of Railroad Revolution, a 3 from Alex and a 4 from Sean.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, this week, ladies and gentlemen, it is a special Dukes Quadruple-Take. And what's perfect about that is our first game we're talking about in our Dukes Quadruple-Take this week is Quadropolis.
So I made the argument that this is not a quadruple take, it's an octuple take.
Because it's a double take on, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it applies. The logic is sound.
This was from episode 89, titled Quadropolis, and we were in the same page on this one mostly. I was a conflicted 3 on this game, so I was thinking it might be a 4, could be, maybe I was dragged down by the play experience, and ultimately settled on a 3. Sean, you were pretty definitive on this one, said it was quite easily a 3 for you.
Yeah, a 4 or higher was never a thought in my mind.
Yep. So we were actually fairly down on this, and Sean, this one was fairly popular. It was out there for a while.
Well, this was a Days of Wonder game, right? They do, in addition to whatever Ticket to Ride expansions they do basically one release a year, and this was last year's release. And so always a high production value, always a lot of buzz about these games. And I enjoy a lot of Days of Wonder games. I really do. But I found this one lacking, and I think the big comparison that I made was this Between Two Cities, from Stonemaier Games, published by Chocolate Decadence.
That's right.
And so, jeez. Sorry, Jamie. Sorry.
Nope.
And so what I liked about Between Two Cities was that it was very much a filler game. It was quick, and there were some interesting decisions, interesting tension. This had, I think, that same amount of interestingness, that same amount of decision making, but in a bit more of a convoluted package, which was still ultimately a fairly light game, but there was just too much setup, too much fiddliness, too much moving stuff around during the game that I would rather play Between Two Cities, and I feel like I get a similar experience. And so, yeah, I think it's a solid game in the sense of, like you were saying before, mechanically it's fine. I could see why a lot of people would enjoy this game. But just for me, I just found it incredibly boring and tedious. And ultimately what you're doing is you're selecting these different city tiles to place in your city. And based on which tiles you take and how you place them, you're going to score points in different ways. Great. Fine. Terrific. But yeah, so I found it tedious, and I find that unfortunate because I think it looks fantastic. Again, I think there are a lot of people out there that will like this, and I can't fault them in any way, shape, or form for that.
Have you played it since?
Oh, no. I got rid of it in the Gamer's Garage sale.
Is it still a 3?
So when I said it was quite easily a 3, that wasn't saying that it wasn't potentially going to be a 2, but more of it just definitely wasn't even consideration going to be a 4. It's not going to be a 2. So whatever flavor you just gave to Railroad Revolution, okay, that 3, but floating towards a 2, that's where I'd give it. Looking back on it, I have no desire to ever play this again. I can't give it a 2 though, because like I said, I think that there's a lot here for people to like. Just didn't work for me.
I have played this since.
You what?
As recently as on my trip around the world.
What?
Yeah, I played this one at Bastard Cafe in Copenhagen.
Oh.
And yeah, I don't remember why this one came out, but it came out. I think. Was it there or was it Singapore? I'm pretty sure it was Copenhagen. One of the folks who played with me, try and remind me of what I actually played. I think it was in Copenhagen, but maybe it wasn't. In any case, yeah, I'm in the same, it was definitely Copenhagen. All right. Got
Excellent.
It. We're locked in.
Excellent.
I was a conflicted 3 before. I think I'm now a definitive 3 on this one. Yeah, it just doesn't stand out as exciting. And really, if Empire had it or didn't have it, I wouldn't care too much. I do think there's a right situation for this game, and I think it certainly is good for newer gamers and good to help introduce folks. And I like the fact that it has an expert mode in there. I like the fact that it has a couple of different gameplay styles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that it's in the box.
Sure.
It's good value.
Sure.
Anyway.
Watchdog Alex making his triumphant return.
That's right. But not really, because that would imply I was watching. Anyway. It ultimately settles at a 3 for me. It's one that I think is solid enough mechanically, has a role, but isn't something I'm super excited about.
Sure. So over in the guild, Megan Naxer said, have I been commenting long enough in the guild to have discussed this one a year ago? If I did, I haven't played it since. I was super excited for this game, and it fell flat when I played it. Too light for my taste, and I'd much rather play Suburbia. But I'm biased, as that is my favorite game, and she gives it a 3 out of 6.
Honorary Duke host Jeremy, friend of the show, we'll go there, says, it's been in my sell list on BGG for 6 months, and I keep lowering the price. Enough said.
Yeah.
But I think he might have gotten an offer on that thread for the game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That might have worked out for Jeremy.
Yeah, no, that's good. And so I find Megan's point interesting that it's too light for her taste. And that's not to say, at least in my case, that I don't enjoy certain light games. You take a game like Karuba, which is super light. I love that game. I think it's fantastic because for what it is supposed to be, it works. It works time-wise, fiddliness-wise, whatever. And this game, Quadropolis, is too light for all the
setup and rigmarole
that accompanies it.
Yeah, I hear you.
So did I just say accoutrement? And then in that pronunciation? That's weird. Anyway,
Well done.
Thank you.
It's time for America's favorite new game show, Spoils of War! This week, our contestant Sean Ramirez is trying to figure out how many ones are out there. Sean.
Hi there, Alex. I'm really excited to be here. I love this show, and I'm ready to guess.
And how many are you going to guess?
Four ones. There's 4 ones.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Sean. You lose.
Oh, so there's not 4?
No.
Oh, you should tell the home audience how many there are.
3. There were 3. So Spoils of War is an awesome take from Arcane Wonders on Liar's Dice, but with a little Viking and gambling twist to it.
So Spoils of War has been designed by Brian Pope and Jason Medina, and we're expecting a June 2017 release right around the corner.
We got this one in at BGGCon, and it was a ton of fun.
It absolutely was. Big fan of Liar's Dice, and the twist and the depth that this adds to that, I think is definitely something worth checking out.
Check out Arcane Wonders' new title, Spoils of War, coming out sometime in June, and check out all of Arcane Wonders' awesome titles at arcanewonders.com. All right, so that's the first half of our Duke's quadruple or octuple take, depending on whichever way you want to take that. Next up, episode 90, Party Like It's Level 99, referencing our friendly local game publisher, Level 99 Games, who put out Millennium Blades, and this was a surprise boxcars. Not a surprise in that Sean loved this one, but a surprise in that I love this one as much as...
I thought you were going to hate this game, Alex. I really did.
As we talk through, it's really interesting thematically. It does some unique, interesting stuff. Nothing else plays like this as far as the mechanics of it. There's different routes and different payoffs to this. The main drawback to it is the setup time. Yeah. The fact that you can't get it out as often as you'd like to because it's a bear to set up and to teach. You want players who know what they're doing going into this. Love this game. Haven't played with any of the expansions which have since come out. Sean, I actually see some of them are sitting right here.
Yeah, there was a Kickstarter for them. I backed the expansions. I have yet to play with them. I will say that our buddies over at Meeple Realty have an excellent insert.
Pledge your fealty to Meeple Realty.
Which does absolutely help with the setup and breakdown. There's a nice little card shoe in it. Yeah, no, this game is fantastic. So it's half real time as you're furiously opening you're simulating opening packs of CCG cards, and you're doing trades, and you're buying in the aftermarket, and you're trying to complete sets, and it's so frantic, but it's timed. It's not super overwhelming like some real-time games can be. I think that there's probably some that might find it overwhelming. I didn't find it overwhelming. And then there's a really interesting tournament play that occurs where you're playing out just a handful of cards and you're trying to synergize them. There are different card effects that will flip them, that will get you points at the end of the game. And in fact, if you want to hear a recent review, our buddies over at Boards Alive, they just reviewed this game. And the more I was listening to it, I'm like, oh, I got to get this back to the table really soon. I'm super excited to play this game again. In fact, had we not had the Baseball Highlights tournament last night, 14th mention, I would have said, hey, let's play this again ahead of the double take, because this is something that I am constantly thinking about bringing out. And the hard part is like, I just don't want to teach it. I really don't. I love it. I think it's fantastic. Quick note, though, you did not initially give this a 6.
Oh,
you gave it a 5.
Oh, I forgot about that.
I was so disappointed because the way you were talking about it, it sounded like it was going to be a 6, and you were like, nah, it's just fell short. It's going to be a 5. And then we wound up playing it some more, and a couple weeks later, you were like, yeah, it's a 6. I'm crazy. Yeah. I think we've both had our moments doing that. Yeah. Where we've initially given something an 11, and then it gets upgraded to a 12. Yeah. A boxcars winner. So awesome job. It's Sean, I just quickly go through it. Does it stay to 6? Oh, yeah. It's a 6 for me too. Yeah. It's fantastic. It was an honorable mention in my top 10 of all time. And I think it made my top 10. I think it made yours. I think it was number 10. Yeah, I think so. It was like my 12, 13. It's super good. I highly recommend it. Still shocked how much you like it. I really like this game. Megan Naxer says, this game is more fun than it has any right to be. My only real experience with CCGs is a few games with Magic and casually playing Hearthstone. I had no idea I would like this monstrosity of a game and was curious to try it. Friend invited us over, conned us into assembling his money, and then we did it wrong. Sorry, Eric. And then we fell in love. We bought a copy of the base game, kickstarted the expansion, and have been loving it ever since. The timed deck building phases have just enough tension with the timer to be exciting, but aren't too fast.
I always feel like I have just enough time to figure out what I'm doing. The tournaments are fun, don't outstay their welcome for what is a very simple game and can be very exciting. Overall, I have never not had an absolute blast playing this game. I absolutely love this one, and it's the only 2016 release to break into my top 10 of all time. She gives this one a 6 out of 6 as well. So some like-minded thoughts from the guild on this one today, but hard to disagree with anything she said. And yeah, hearing her talk about it, I'm like, oh, it'd be nice to play this one again soon.
Let's do it. Wednesday night, we're going to play. Boom,
Are we?
Done.
Are
yes.
we? We got stuff to review.
We're going to play this. What
are we reviewing next week?
We're reviewing. Well, we have to do our planning meeting. So that's a little interesting tidbit.
We're going to do a YouTube video of our entire planning meeting.
So in the past, we haven't planned out for more than a couple weeks. We might have some nebulous idea. Oh, we're going to review this at some point in the future. But while you were gone, I had to plan 14 weeks in advance. And so now I kind of like that. So
no, I'm doing 14 weeks.
No. Just a month at a time. So I think we can do this. I think we can play this next week.
Okay, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see. I'm not all in on this yet. It depends on what we're reviewing because we'll
review something on the lighter end just so we can play
this. Good. Then I know what we're probably reviewing next week.
Yeah.
I'm not going to spoil it here. You have to go to our Board Game Geek Guild to figure that out.
Guild number 2008. Boom.
All right. So that's going to do it for our Duke's Quadruple-Takes.
Yeah.
And now, before we wrap things up, our naming runner-ups for this week's episode mentioned that there were some good ones, and yeah, we had a hard time choosing. Sort of. Not really. Matt Walker with a nice one. This was Quad City DJs, which Sean didn't initially get, and then I played for him a song, which he may or may not edit into this episode right here. If he didn't, it goes, "Come on, ride the train and ride it." So that one's pretty clever because it incorporates the Quadropolis and then, of course, the train game with Come On Ride the Train, that hit 90s jam.
Which you have to know the lyrics, though, for it to make sense.
Well, no, that's the name of the song.
Quad City DJs?
No, that's the name of the group. Come On Ride It. Yeah, you have to know that they're one-hit wonder.
Yeah.
Which is Come On Ride It
My
and
point
Ride It.
still stands. You have to know the lyrics.
Okay. Well...
We're arguing about something that we're both saying the same thing for.
All right, excellent. That's how it goes. Jimmy had a couple of good ones, but our favorite was Track to the Future, referencing Millennium Blades with a kind of a future. I think it's set in the future. And track, obviously, trains. We said Trek to the Future 3. That might have been perfect because that's the one with the trains.
Are we not alternating these?
Oh.
You're just reading them all?
That's
fine. Keep going. That's fine.
No, Sean, go ahead.
You're breaking in here.
Have the next two. Go ahead.
Okay. I just want one. I'm not selfish, Alex. I just want one. BJ from Board Game Gumbo said, Engine number 99. Engine number 99. I don't know what that is either.
So that's referencing the song or rhyme, children's rhyme, Engine number 9. It's a song. I think it's a children's rhyme too, but it's also a song. It's both.
It's not an Ace of Base song or something?
Not as far as I know. We should look that up. Anyway, 99 referencing Level 99 games for Millennium Blades, so well done.
Also Nina's
BJ.
99 Luftballons. No,
not referencing that because that wouldn't make any sense. Maybe for next week's episode that would make sense.
Everyone's a Captain Kirk. Na 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 na
okay.
na na na.
All right.
Verify and anyway. Yeah, I'm not supposed to sing. Sorry, everyone.
Way to go. Jacob Kyvenhoven.
See why I didn't want to read that one?
I don't know if that's how it's pronounced or not. I'm going to guess, but I think he's Meeple Leaf Reviews, a Canadian review place.
Yep.
So, and Jacob oftentimes will submit awesome names after the deadline, after we've already released the episode or recorded the episode.
That's referred to as calking it.
Oh, yeah.
Name for Todd Calc,
who did that and actually won one week doing that.
Yeah.
So, hey, you could win sometimes doing that. Not this week, though. His suggestion this week was Fat Stacks for the number 4, building tracks. So, referencing Quadropolis, referencing the Fat Stacks and Millennium Blades, and referencing Railroad Revolution. So, Well done, clever title. And rounding out our official top 6.
What?
Sean will tell you the last name.
So, John Giblin had Boxcars Down the Line, of course, referencing boxcars as a type of, train car, right? And then also the fact that Millennium Blades is a Boxcars award winner.
Which it continues to be.
Yeah. So then we've got one honorable mention, which you were just so opposed to this one.
Yeah.
Even being in the top 6.
So this is from the Name Father, Steve O'Rourke, who's named 10 episodes. And Steve, I love you, man.
Well, and I said, okay, this isn't going to be a winner, but I think it belongs in the top 6.
And maybe it's just not knowing Seinfeld well enough to get this one. I've seen some Seinfeld. I'm familiar enough with Seinfeld. I wasn't familiar with this reference.
Okay, so before I say the name of it, it's a reference to George Costanza, who I identify with in so many ways, unfortunately. And he has this long-standing desire to be an architect. Not in any practical way. It's not like he wants to go back to school. He's just like, I think I could be an architect. And he lies to people about being an architect. And he works for, his name is Art Vandelay. That's his alter ego that's an architect. There's also this thing with Vandelay Industries, which is what this comes from, what the title is. It's Vanderbilt Industries. Jerry! Vandelay Industries! Jerry! No?
Nope.
All right. Anyway, so Vanderbilt, of course, is a railroad tycoon. So that's where that comes in. And the fact that George wants to be an architect, that goes in with Quadropolis. So
Vanderbilt Industries.
Vanderbilt Industries, a reference to Vandelay Industries.
So that's our top 6-ish. The rest of our top 6-ish for
with
this week.
With an honorable mention. I fought for you, Steve. I'm sorry. This new host over here, we got to work him in.
Anyway, so that's going to do it for this week's episode. Sean, we're recording, forgot to mention this, on May the 4th. May the 4th be with you.
And also with you. In fact, I got a text from my mom at like 7:30 in the morning that was, a little picture. It was a Pug Vader. And said, May the 4th be with you.
I saw somewhere on Twitter, one of the airports posted a flight to Coruscant.
Oh.
Let me see if I can find the flight number. Flight DB94 to Coruscant. So, well done. That was in Miami.
Do you know what that's a reference to?
DB94 is a robot, a droid of some kind.
Nope, incorrect.
Nope. Okay.
Docking Bay 94.
Okay.
Which is the docking bay that the Millennium Falcon was in in Mos Eisley? Yeah. Which is also the name of the podcast that our friends Jason and Jason, Talon Strikes, who are doing the game that I just said I was backing that I'm completely forgetting now. The jousting game. I can't remember. Sorry, guys. But anyway, the name of their podcast is Docking Bay 94.
Well, in any case, May the 4th be with you again.
And to celebrate, I now have 2 boxes of Star Wars Destiny Spirit of Rebellion, which you were in the area of Empire and were nice enough to pick up for me.
72 booster packs, Sean.
Yeah.
72!
Yeah.
That's so many.
No, it's not.
That's so many.
I'm going to just have a mediocre deck from all that.
Acquisition disorder. I had to drop it for that. That's so many booster packs.
So finalizing the time, by the time you're hearing this, there should be a video of Suzanne and I opening our packs on YouTube.
Excellent.
So that,
we're recording on a Thursday.
Your junkie fix.
It's a little weird.
Well, and this may be the new thing.
It may be. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode.
Yes, indeed. So once again, big thanks to Daniel Newman for naming this episode 142 Tracks of the Trade. Great job, Daniel. We appreciate your help with that. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Hail Hydra.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on May the 4th, 2017. Our theme music is provided by Carbo Hydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to dukesofdice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors for this episode, Arcane Wonders and Tasty Minstrel Games. Check out all their awesome titles at arcanewonders.com and playtmg.com. We'll see you back here in 1 week. Until then, game on!